Alright guys, well, I've been staying in hotels for the last couple of nights. Actually, tonight will be the 5th night in a row because I stayed in a hotel for 3 nights in Durango and I've been kind of getting used to it. I guess I kind of needed a vacation from my vacation, and so I've been kind of cheating. But at least I'm honest. This was the center of the Anasazi culture from 900 to 1150. They were starting to build it all up around 850, and it lasted possibly all the way until 1250. But this would have been like the New York City of the ancient world. This was a huge metropolis and a center for culture and trading and learning sciences. There would have been thousands of people here, and there would have been incredible opportunity for trading all sorts of rare things that would have been brought from as far away as the Yucatan. This was a center of administration, ceremonial importance, a sacred place. So according to one theory, this place was the natural result of everything that we saw in the previous steps in the construction of the pit houses. Pit houses next led to single-story little pueblos that ended up turning into large pueblos and great houses and villages, single-story villages, double-story villages, until we get all the way here where they have 4 stories and over 500 rooms. And there was miles and miles of roads and networks connecting everything here to Chaco. And this was the height of their culture. Then at about 1150, everything kind of fell apart, and these types of places, they became less and less popular. People moved into the cliffs. Then around 1300, between 1280 and 1300, everything just stops completely for these Puebloan peoples, and they end up migrating. And there are other theories, however. Another theory that was proposed by archaeologist Christy Turner. At this site here, we also find plenty of human remains. Turner found over 72 sites that had proof of a ritualistic type of cannibalistic society that is not at all different from what we see in Mesoamerican tribes, such as the Toltecs and the Aztecs. It seems like this would have been like an imperial center. And it started off as being a place where most likely this blood cult from Mexico, a Toltec type of band, came up here, organized the people into creating this huge site using their knowledge, their technology from their Toltec civilization. So they had quite a bit of experience and knowledge. They came up here, and for a while, they had a very high society. However, there was still black magic going on here, even when things were in their best. There's Native American legends that say that this place was a place of such evil, that there was so much black magic going on here, that they were abusing the great ceremonies. It came to such an extreme that they caused a disturbance in the balance of nature. They say that there was a huge earthquake and fire, and then this whole area was destroyed by fire and earthquake. In several of the rooms, they found dozens and dozens of human bodies. They were discarded. They were not buried in a ceremonial way that would have been typical. There was signs of them cleaning, cutting, preparing the human body just like you would an animal. There's even signs of polished bone, which comes from being stirred around in a pot, which is like sandpaper on its edges, and it makes the bone take on a shine. And they found evidence of human proteins inside of the pots and the sticks that they would use to turn the pots. They also found in the hearth of a kiva, of an underground pit, they found petrified human dung, human waste. And they were able to find in the residues of that petrified human dung proof of human proteins. Now that's the smoking gun, folks. And it's interesting that the other cultures, the other tribes neighboring them, did not have this culture of cannibalism. Tribes like the Hohokam. The Hohokam went through the same exact droughts. They were neighbors, they lived in the same areas, and at no point did they ever resort to cannibalism or anything like that. There's evidence of cannibalism here at Chaco starting from the very beginning, starting from around 900. So it was even during their height, during the height of their whole civilization. Even then, they were practicing cannibalism. And it could very well be that this was introduced, that this was brought to them by an elite tribe that had their own exodus from their Toltec culture and came up here and started their own type of Mesoamerican blood cult in which they terrorized the Anasazi people using fear of having your family not only butchered but eaten. So this kind of helps us to understand a little bit more of what happened to places like Mesa Verde and why did people move to the cliffs. Looks like it was to escape an oppressive theocracy that's using human sacrifice and cannibalism as a means of control. And further evidence to prove that these were Toltec Mexican tribes, or a band, a group, a cult who came up here. Some of the evidence would be one of the skeletons they found here had modified teeth. And these modified teeth, they file away at the teeth, maybe so that they can attach jewels or gold ornaments to their teeth. That was not done anywhere in the States, okay? It wasn't done, the California tribes didn't do it, none of the Great Basin tribes did it, none of the Plains Indians did it. This tooth modification was very much Mesoamerican. So, same culture from Mexico. This is just the furthest north that they came. And to prove it, there is a ball court. The ball courts were part of this huge culture that went all the way down south to Nicaragua. You've got signs of Mexican Toltec culture with this theocracy that's using human sacrifice and cannibalism the same exact way that they were around Mexico City, around Teotihuacan and Tula and sites like those. This huge site, this is like nothing else in this part of the world. There's nothing like this in this part of the world until we get down into Mexico City. I'm also seeing these like little doorways or windows that were sealed in. It almost looks like they just sealed everything up because maybe they wanted to forget about it. They wanted to keep people away from accessing it again. See, here's another one right over here. These pathways have been sealed up. It could have been that when they finally left this place, they filled everything in to keep the spirits out, to shut this place down, to end what this place was for so many centuries, which was the center of this death cult who would send out war parties to enforce their theocracy. And if you were on the wrong side of whatever elite was inhabiting this place, then they would make an example out of you. Truth be told, you would not want to be an outsider here 800 years ago. If you were somebody who was any kind of outcast, prisoner of war, or anything, there's a good chance that you would be next in line for the human sacrifice ceremony. And it'd be your bones that would be up on the buffet. Chaco Canyon was built not only to house people and all the different aspects of your society, but it also had many signs of a high society and high knowledge. There were astronomical observatories. This all has the signs of a very high culture, a culture that does not just arise overnight. It's kind of hard to ask me to believe that we went from ground pit kivas to single-story pueblos next to the kivas to two-story at time kivas making great houses. Then we went from that to all of a sudden this. I mean, it's hard to believe. This is something on such a more grand scale than anything else we have from any of the other tribes. The Hohokam didn't build anything like this. They had their pueblos, they had their villages, but it wasn't anything like this. Whatever band of Toltecs that came up here and organized these people, they were smart enough to know that they had to keep that certain aspect of the kiva alive, and they included in their blood cult. They came along and they made them great kivas. It all looked like it was their indigenous culture from the outside, but the inside was being run by this Toltec blood cult theocracy. So what I see here, I see a people who were promised a great society in exchange for accepting a certain theocratic elite. And this would have been the place that those people in Mesa Verde in the cliffs that they were hiding from. There was a big exodus from Chaco Canyon around 1150, which is the same exact time that we see certain sites in Mesa Verde. That's exactly when they're starting to get built. After 200 years, 250 years, people have had enough. They leave, and they know by leaving that they are invoking the wrath of the imperial forces here back at Chaco. They know it, and that's why they go into the cliffs. That's why they have these extremely well defendable, hard to get to types of locations. Here we are at Sand Canyon Pueblo. And this was a Pueblo village, a community that only lasted for about 40 years, from 1240 to about 1285. And this is outside of the Chaco system. It's likely that this would have been one of those pueblos, one of those villages that was part of the group that left Chaco. And they would have been at war with Chaco. As we can see from this wall, what I'm showing you right here is a wall. Now it's been reclaimed by the earth for about 700 years. And this wall was a high wall that went all the way around this pueblo to defend it. At earlier sites, we don't see a big wall to enclose everything. It enclosed the spring as well as their community, their village. And this village has about 420 to 450 different rooms. They found 90 to 100 kivas. We can estimate then there would have been about maybe 100 families living here. There was about 14 towers, and the towers, they were part of the wall. And the fact that Sand Canyon only lasted for about 40 years tells me again that there was quite a war going on, and that they were amassing, they were coming together into huge groups. They had towers that they could actually signal to the other pueblos from miles and miles. They've even seen in Mesa Verde towers that created a network, a system, so that they could let each other know if one pueblo was under attack. This site was built and abandoned in a lifetime, relatively about 45 years. Would have only been about a generation and a half, maybe 2 generations that lived here. And there's signs that it wasn't really abandoned as much as maybe the forces from Chaco came here and ended it, massacred everybody, because there's signs of the beams, the roof beams, being burnt. There's also skeletons left sprawling with signs of violence, like having their skulls bashed in. At 1150, something happens. Now I also need to mention that this is the first drought. There was about a 50-year drought, and around 1150, they're right about in the middle of it. Drought might have been a part of what led to the collapse of the society. Probably what happened here is whatever were the benefits of being part of the Chaco society, once the drought hit, those benefits were no longer there. Maybe rations were only being preserved for the elite. So now, on top of you paying this tax, on top of you being expected to perhaps sacrifice a family member, now there's this drought. That was the final straw. At that point, people are like, I'm leaving. And there's a huge exodus from Chaco. However, Chaco doesn't stop for at least another 100 years until about 1250. They keep on going. And in order to stop and try to suppress this exodus and this resistance movement, they resort to some pretty cruel means, going around with a goon squad, basically, making an example of any community that left. This finally comes to a head around 1280. Now, starting in 1274, there's another drought, and it might have even been more severe than the first one. So they're about 6 years, maybe 10 years into a severe drought again, and people are becoming even more desperate. And even if maybe Chaco had already fallen apart, there would have still been bands with different allegiances, different alliances that had different sides during the war with Chaco. They all just go at it in this last huge battle, probably over resources. And there's so much bloodshed after 1290 that by 1300, there's nobody left here. The last tree ring dates we get are in the 1270s. By 1280, construction pretty much stops. Whatever final battle happened after that, it was so bad that they all leave. And they come back to these sites to pay tribute. They come back into those sites today and hold ceremonies to honor their ancestors. But they left and began a post-apocalyptic phase in their tribal history where they had just left their grand societies, this grand civilization that they enjoyed in Chaco, and then they tried to continue their own version of in their resistance when they fled from Chaco. They were creating places like this site here where we're at right now, and large places like Cliff Palace and Longhouse in Mesa Verde. I see it as an attempt to be able to salvage the best of a civilization that had been corrupt by the Toltec Chaco elite. And they tried to create their own beautiful version of that out here. So the experiment ended. The experiment starts around 550 and ends in 1300. And at that time, they still have a knowledge of farming, but for the most part, they go back to a hunter-gatherer type of civilization where they don't have that infrastructure, that huge society like Chaco anymore. I'm here in Canyon of the Ancients. I'm getting ready to go back into Durango to my hotel. Thank you for subscribing. clicking that little bell for notifications so you can be the first to watch each new episode. Thanks for watching. Catch you on the flip side.